Quay clip nhóm người ngang nhiên đi xe đạp vào làn ô tô. Người đàn ông bị cả nhóm đuổi theo đòi kiểm tra điện thoại.
Unit 14, Business Cycle, presented by Team 14. Members including Minh Hiếu, Đức Long, Anh Dũng, Minh Tiến, and Tuấn Anh. Outlines. Revision of key terms. Reading number 1. Reading number 2. And further research. This presentation will help you to revise the key terms. Secondly, identify and learn important words from reading number 1 and reading number 2. And finally, acquire cool information about the business cycle that impresses your friends.
Okay, we are going to revise some of our important key terms. So this is called the business cycle model, and it's basically a graph with the real GDP over here on the vertical side and time on the horizontal side. We're going to look at different words, different terms like expansion, trial, contraction later on in this video. Now, so the business cycle model is simply a model or a graph showing the increases and the decreases in a nation's real GDP over time. And this model usually demonstrates an increase in real GDP or in the long run and with short-term fluctuations in output in the short term. Now, secondly, we have expansion, which is the phase of the business during which the output is increasing, and its inverse is recession or contraction, which is when the output is falling. So again, this is when output or GDP is increasing, we have expansion, and when the output or the GDP decreases, it's simply a contraction. It's really simple. Next up is the peak. The peak is a turning point between a expansion and a contraction. And during a peak, the output has stopped increasing and it begins to decrease. And the trial is the turning point between a contraction and an expansion. And during a trial, the output has been falling during the recession. The recession begins to bottom out and it increases again. So in this one, this is a peak. We start from the expansion, we go through a peak and go down into a contraction. And this is the contraction right here. We'll go from a contraction, we hit a trial, and we come back up again with an expansion. Next up is called a recovery. A recovery is just taking a rest and become better, like this guy. So recovery is simply when GDP begins to increase following a contraction and a trial, and an economy is considered in recovery until the real GDP returns to its long-run potential level. The growth trend. The growth trend is basically the straight line that runs across the graph that we've seen. It is usually upward sloping, and it shows the long run change in real GDP over time. So this is the growth trend. Next up is called the potential output. The potential output is the level of output that the economy can achieve when it is operating at full employment. And when the economy is operating at full employment, it experiences its natural rate of unemployment, which is no more, no less than that. And we have another two very related terms, which is the positive output gaps and the negative output gaps. This is the two words that you need to pay attention to, the more and the less, right? So the positive output gap is simply the difference between the actual output and the potential output. When an economy is producing at more than the full employment output. When there is a positive output gap, then the rate of unemployment is less than it naturally is, and the economy is operating outside of its production possibilities curve. And its inverse is called the negative output gap, and it's basically substituting more by less and less by more, which is, well, in the negative output gap, the difference is between the actual output and the potential output is producing less than full employment output. And when there is a negative output gap, the rate of unemployment is more than what it naturally is. This is what it looks like when it is, well, described graphically in economics. It looks pretty complex, but basically these are the things that we need to care about. This is the real output, and this is what it could have been, right? So this is smaller than what it potentially could be. It's called negative output gap. And this is what the real output is. This is what it could have been, and is more than what it could have been potentially. So it's called a positive output gap. It's basically pretty simple.
Ladies and gentlemen, now I'm going to present to you about the first reading before we have already revised about our key terms. First one, we need to know about the cycle, the business cycle. Here, the business cycle is a permanent feature of market economies in which GDP repeatedly expands and contracts. It consists of 4 main stages, and it also represents through the stages in which a business cycle grows, flows, and also grows and rise again. Now, first one, expansion. What is expansion? It is an economic activity rises, including production, employment, investment, profits, prices, and interest rates all increases as confidence and spending grow. The second phase is after the expansion, because we already know that expansion is the phase that every economic and also business have to undergo through. Next one, we have a peak. A peak is when the expansion, we can just rise, keeps rising, and it's already reached a peak. So a peak here is the economic reaches full capacity. Growth here slows because spending becomes unsustainable. Debt rises, and higher interest rates may start to reduce our consumption. And after the stage of a peak, following that, we have contraction. Contraction is the stage when the demand falls, leading to lower outputs. And also, at this stage, all the profits, prices, and investment also falls. If it lasts over 6 months, it's called a recession. However, if it leads to over a year, it becomes a depression. And the fourth stage in our business cycle, we have trough and recovery. So the business bottoms up, falling prices encourage spending again, and also production and investment begin to rise again. And economic activity gradually recovers, starting a new phase called expansion, and the product life cycle starts again. Okay, so we need to discover why we have our business cycle. We have 2 cases. The first one is called endogenous causes or internal causes. So the internal theory says that the cycle is caused by people's spending, borrowing, and saving decisions. Also, we have the expectations, and the key mechanism here is that people overspend when they feel optimistic. Optimistic of what? They feel like they have enough money, they can spend more, and also they can buy to satisfy their needs and their habits of consumption. And if we keep buying, the overspending gonna lead to debt. Next one, debt must be repaid. Of course, we cannot stay in the debt forever, right? We have to repay. So consumption eventually slows down. Higher interest rates raise because borrowing costs, forcing households to cut their spending. And the fear of unemployment. What is fear of unemployment? I believe that the fear of unemployment appears in everybody's behavior. We also fear about being unemployed, being fired, and also being kicked out of our organization. So this fear of unemployment makes people save more and consume less. In this case, the demand reduces. Lower demands can also reduce our production process, the employment, and also the profits gained from our organization. And also, investment drops when demand getting slower and slower and deepening the downturn. When the supply exceeds our demands, however, the price gonna fall, stimulating consumption again and beginning the stage called recovery. Okay, so after the internal causes, we also have the things called exogenous or external causes leading to the business cycle model, right? External theories look for causes outside normal economic activity, such as we have technological breakthroughs. So technological breakthrough here is that major innovations can trigger the new waves of investment. It's called hiring, productivity, improvement, and leading to the economy into the expansion phases. However, once the economy and the technology have reached to a certain level, they are widely adopted. Investment may slow down, causing a thing called the downturn. The second factor here is called natural disasters. So natural disaster is such the event called the earthquake, the flood, and also tsunami can also suddenly interrupt our production stages, reduce the supply, and lower consumer spending, pushing the theory into a phase called contraction, even recession or depression. The third factor that also influence on our economic activity here is elections and political changes. This is the external factors that every economy and every business have to face to, because political events create the policy uncertainty, influencing how firms and consumers behaves. You can imagine like before the election, the business may delay their investment, slowing our economic activity. But after the major political shifts like the election or some of the economic changes in terms of the nation and also worldwide, the new policies like taxes, spending programs, and regulations can either stimulate expansion or trigger the recession in the business cycle. The fourth and also the final factor in here is that demographic shifts. What is demographic shifts? We have changes in population structure such as aging population or migration surges affect long-term consumption and also the whole labor supply of the business. Throughout this factor and also the combination of internal factors and external also endogenous causes, we have come to the conclusion of Joseph Schumpeter's theory. So Joseph Schumpeter was one of the most influential economists of the early 20th century. So what does he say? He views that major technological innovations, for example, steam engine, electricity, railways, microchips, trigger the periods of the term called creativity destruction, where new industry replaced the old one, causing fluctuations in the economy. And you can see that the business cycle is the very sophisticated but also very interesting terms. So beside and also behind the terms of the Schumpeter theory, is there any other theory that also can influence our business cycle model? Let's discover that in the next session. Thank you.
Hello folks, my name is Anh and I'm gonna present you the vocabulary of reading 2. First up, we have equilibrium. It is a state of balance. For example, when supply is the same as demand. At equilibrium, there is no pressure for prices to rise or fall because buyers and sellers agree on the market price. For example, if a shop produces 100 sandwiches per day and customers buy exactly 100, the sandwich market is at equilibrium. Next up, we have deficit. It's an amount of money that is smaller than is needed when spending exceeds revenue. Government and businesses often borrow money to cover deficit. For instance, if a government collects $500 million in taxes but spends $600 million, it has $100 million deficit. The third one is surplus. It's an excess, a quantity that is larger than is needed. Surpluses can occur in government budget, production, or inventory. For example, a company produces 100 shares but sells only 800. The extra 200 shares represents a surplus. Well, next up, we'll have fiscal policy. It goes along with monetary policy. Fiscal policy is when it's like the government actions concerning taxation and public expenditure. Fiscal policy can stimulate an economy during a recession or cool it down during inflation. Well, as I just said, it got along with monetary policy. There are government or central bank action concerning the rate of growth of the money in circulation. Monetary policy affects inflation, growing investment and economic growth. Next, we have money supply. Money supply is a total of money available in an economy at a particular time. Further explanation. It is the changes in money supply influence inflation and economic activity. And final one, Keynesianism is the famous economic theory by John Maynard Keynes that the government monetary and fiscal policy should stimulate businesses activity and increase employment in a recession. And that's the end.
Hello, my name is Long, and I will talk about the Keynesian economics and the monetarism theory. First, we will need to discover about what it is and the founder of this theory. This is John Maynard Keynes. He is the famous British economist during the late 20th century. And now we will talk about the historical background of this theory, the rise of the Keynes. Before the 1930s, the economists believed that the economy will naturally return to full employment as falling rate interest renew investment. And so, however, the Great Depression disproved this. Unemployment stayed very high and demand collapsed, and the economy failed to self-correct itself. And that's when the economist John Maynard Keynes argued that economies can remain stuck in the crisis without the government intervention. So, and famously stating that, in the long run, we are all dead. And his view that active intervention is needed to restore full employment is the basis of the Keynesian economics. So, what is Keynesianism? Keynesianism economics holds that the government should intervene, especially during recession, by increasing spending or borrowing to support demand, employment, and price stability. And however, the recession are caused by insufficient demand. Specifically, it's when people save too much and spend too little, and the firm have to produce less and hire less worker, and the recession become more deepens. And that's when the government must step in. To encounter weak private demand, government should increase spending, cut taxes, and expand the money supply and lower tax rates. The opposite must be done during booms, such as they have to raise taxes and tighten money to prevent inflation or overheating. However, there is some criticism and the counter argument between the two theories in the 1950s and 1960s. Milton Friedman monetarism challenged Keynesianism. Monetarists argue that money is neutral in the long run, and increasing the money supply only raises taxes and price, not outputs or jobs. So they believe the government cannot accurately timing and manage properly and during the right intervention, causing stimulus to arrive late and fuel inflation. So instead, the monetarism favors steady, predictable money supply and growth and minimal government interference, and allowing market to adjust naturally. Despite the argument between two theories, the Keynesianism returns in the 21st century. Keynesianism regained influence during the 2008 economic crisis, when government used stimulus spending and liquidity injections and lower interest rates to prevent deeper collapse. Despite some monetarist warnings about the disadvantage of this theory, many countries saw low inflation for many years And after the COVID-19 pandemic, for example, and many other modern downturns, Keynesianism strategy remains central to crisis management. And that is the end of the introduction about the Keynesianism theory.
Hi, my name is Minh Hiếu, and for further research of Keynesianism presented by Long, I'm gonna take some real-life cases and the application of Keynesianism in those cases. So, as Long has presented, we can infer that the essence of Keynesianism is the intervention of the government. So, we're going to look into two modern cases where Keynesianism has been applied. First of all, COVID-19 is one of the biggest disease and hurdles that humankind have faced to this date. The consequence of this is prolonged lockdown, cancellation, hindrance of multiple jobs, and since people cannot go outside, online jobs are the only options. Then there are consumer spendings plummets since there are not much income enough for people to spend. Therefore, the consumer spendings plummets to an all-time high bottom. Then, what can the government do to this? The application of Keynesianism to this can be stated as, first of all, stimulus check. What is the meaning of this? Governments provide payments for selected individuals to prevent falling of demand. This is aimed for the jobs with low income or decreased income due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Then there is extending employment benefits to prevent falling of demand as well. This is aimed for the unemployment department of the society, as they do not have anything to spend and therefore need extra support from the government. Next up, we can rewind back a bit to the 2008 financial crisis. This crisis is centered in the United States. The causes of this are the excessive speculation of real estate. What's the meaning of this? Is that at the time, real estate property values have been predicted to rise in the following years. Therefore, investors, consumers, customers, and corporations dive into invest in those real estate properties. And as a result of those false speculations, there is a collapse in real estate value. Another cause of this can be said to be inefficient regulations which allow for predatory lending and mortgage to roam freely. And the result of this, and the most important and grave consequences of all, is the lack of trust from the members of the economy to each other. The investor cannot trust the sellers on real estate properties as the price fluctuate too much. So what are the only things that the government can do? That is, first of all, establish new and solid regulation, fixing the lack of trust, fixing the inefficient regulation from previous years. Then they can create a safe economy environment for investors, consumers, and producers feel that their rights and interests are protected and preserved. So, as you can all see, the similarity between these two cases is that the actions and the application of the Keynesianism theory is the things that only the government can do. All government can do. And as for the result of the COVID-19 pandemic, you can all see we have several years later, we are entering the 4.0 technology breakthrough, and the economy is still thriving. And as for the 2007 crisis, I wouldn't be standing here if that crisis have been exacerbated. So that's all for me, and thank you.